All right, all right, all right. Well, welcome, my fellow rhetorical analyzers. I'm glad you are with me for another week, yet another week of remote learning. You are here, Complet 10. This is week 14 of the semester, but as you guys know, this is our fourth week of remote learning. And I'm glad you're tuning in. I'm glad you guys are here. As you guys know, my email is right here if you ever need anything from me, mmain@d51schools.org. My office hours are from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you guys are doing well. Celebration for me this past week, I actually yesterday, I built a dog ramp for the puppy that I'm getting here in just a couple weeks. So I'm super excited for that. And building the ramp yesterday got me even more excited. It's like for the dog, once he gets through the doggy door, he has a ramp to go down. Should be cool. I hope it works. But just doing that project was fun. So that is my celebration. I hope you guys have had some time to be productive outside of just remote learning. Maybe you've taken up a new hobby or something along those lines. I hope you guys are having fun and finding a way to make your time useful and productive. I think that's key during this time. Um, well, hey, I think the video will be pretty short this week. As you guys know, we operate on a weekly basis with this remote learning. I'll have the slides uploaded each week, starting on like Sunday nights, more than likely is when I'll upload it, with the lessons and the assignments for the week. There will then obviously be that video walkthrough. That is what you're listening to now, where I break down each slide, I break down the agenda, the learning targets, and the weekly assignments, and whatnot. So it is in your best interest to watch the video as you navigate through the slides on your own. Typically, we'll have about 2 to 3 assignments due each Friday. That will be obviously through Classroom. You guys know the drill at this point. And then, of course, my email is right there. If you ever need extensions or assistance on anything, you guys have been doing a great job with reaching out. So continue to do that, please. Um, I think the video this week will be fairly short. I have some new material I want to address with you, but we are continuing our rhetorical analysis exploration. And that's really what is going to take us to the end of our time together. We're in our rhetorical analysis unit. The remote learning will look a little different than in terms of what we would have done in class, but we're still going to get the main concepts down through this remote learning. So we're going to start this week with a little rhetorical term self-assessment. I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. And then this is a new concept, creating a rhetorical summary. Um, it's basically a soapstone, but in a paragraph format. I'll show you what that looks like as I go through the notes on creating a rhetorical summary. Then we're going to do an analysis of Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. We'll do a soapstone with that. And then we will do a rhetorical summary introduction. Um, that's basically just showing our comprehension of the notes that we take right here. And then lastly, of course, we have our sort of response, current event response. So it's going to be in a video again, like last week. Video of the week, remote learning week 4 response. So those are the 2 assignments due Friday. It is the Gettysburg Address, soapstone, and rhetorical summary, and the remote learning week 4 video response. If you guys have any questions on any assignments or anything, please, to reach out. The learning targets for this week, it's pretty condensed and pretty simplistic, I would say. We're going to review elements of rhetoric and rhetorical terms as they are applied in a text. That's how we're going to start the week. Then moving forward, we're going to identify elements of a rhetorical summary introduction. That will be through those notes that we're going to take. Then we're going to take those notes and apply them to an analysis of the Gettysburg Address through a soapstone analysis and a rhetorical summary introduction. And my goal is that you will see that a soapstone and a rhetorical summary are closely linked together. They're basically the same thing, but just presented in a different way. And then lastly, of course, I can respond to a pandemic-related video in a thoughtful way. So those are the 4 learning targets for the week, and that will be that. I don't think this video will be terribly long this week, so do reach out if you have questions. To begin this week, we are going to start with this rhetorical term self-assessment. So for the next couple of slides, there will be a series of questions pertaining to rhetorical terms and how they are being used in the given examples. There will be one question on a slide followed by the answer to that question on the next slide. Quiz yourself. So these are going to be texts that we have seen before so far in our rhetorical analysis. So before you check the answer on the following slide, come up with an answer on your own and see how it compares to your answer. Like I said, this is going to be for texts that we've read, the Matthew McConaughey PSA, that example that I gave you, the Lou Gehrig speech, and the Malcolm X piece that we looked at last week. So this is not going to be for a grade. You're not going to turn in any tangible work for this, but it is beneficial that you know these terms and see and are able to explain how they are being applied for the given example. Don't cheat yourself, you guys. This is low stakes, so just do your best. And if you have any questions about any of the answers or the questions, just shoot me an email. Alrighty, so we have the first question, and this is related back to a soapstone term. So what is the occasion or exigence of Matthew McConaughey's public service announcement, that one that we looked at a couple of weeks back, about the COVID-19 pandemic? I have some typos I need to add in here as I'm reviewing this. What do you think is the occasion for this piece? Take a moment. You can pause the video if you'd like, and then I'll show the answer on the next slide here in just a few seconds. All right, so there are potentially a lot of different ways you could answer this, but let's start here in this corner. So when you think of the occasion or exigence of a text, you have to think about the context of the text, the who, what, where, and when. The why is basically the occasion. So when you ask yourself about what is the context, think about then what is provoking the author to make this text. I like this little graphic up here, and the key words that stick out to me. This guy says, what are other words for exigence? This little pigeon, it looks like. And then this pigeon says urgency, want, need, or necessity. So why did McConaughey need to deliver this speech? Why was it necessary? Why did he want to do it? Why was it so urgent? Think about that. Answering those questions gets you to the occasion or the exigence. So my answer was the occasion or exigence for McConaughey's public service announcement is the COVID-19 pandemic itself. More specifically, the pandemic has hit the American people drastically since earlier middle of March 2020. Because of the virus, people are worried and panicking, and people are worried and panicking so much that McConaughey was provoked or wanted to or needed to or had a sense of urgency to deliver his speech. Thinking about question 2 or shifting texts. What is the purpose of Lou Gehrig's farewell to baseball address? Answers may vary on this one. Give you some time to think about a response. can pause the video if you'd like, and then I'll move forward. All right, let's start in this corner again. So when we think about purpose statements, you guys have heard me say this since October. Um, Purpose statements come in the form of to plus a verb and the main idea. So the author's purpose is to persuade you to do something, to entertain something, to inform something, to challenge something, to defend something, whatever the case may be. So based on that, like I said, you could come up with multiple answers or purpose statements, but this is the one I came up with. I said Lou Gehrig's purpose is to give gratitude to his family and friends for their unwavering support throughout his professional baseball career. I found that because he talks about all of his thanks and his gratitude for playing amongst some of the greatest players ever. And with the family piece, he talks about how his wife was so supportive during his time playing baseball, and he's trying to give back his gratitude to her. So that is the purpose statement I developed. Like I said, yours could be a little different, and I still think it would work. Question 3 is a multiple choice. So we have in his speech, Roots of a Tree, Malcolm X states, "Our color became to us like a prison which we felt was keeping us confined, not letting us go this way or that way." So in that text, in that little section, what rhetorical choice is Malcolm X specifically utilizing here? Is he using an anaphora or a sense of repetition with a word or phrase? Is he using a simile, comparison using like or as? Is he using apostrophe, addressing something that is absent or cannot respond back? Or is he using an allusion? Is he referring to something indirectly or directly? Take a few moments, think about your response. Alrighty, so this one is a little more cut and dry, but I said the rhetorical choice Malcolm X is utilizing here is a simile. X uses simile. Remember, a simile is a comparison of two things that normally aren't comparable, but through the use of simile, they use these things to compare them using like or as. And he does this to inform African Americans about the brainwashed perception they have of themselves simply due to their skin color. According to Malcolm X, African Americans viewed their skin tone as a prison because their skin tone prohibited liberation during a time of racism and segregation. So, specifically, the simile comes here. Our color became to us like a prison. If he wanted to use it in a metaphorical sense, he could say, our color is a prison to us. But he threw in that like in there, so therefore it's a simile. Okay, so one more, I think. In Roots of a Tree, Malcolm X creates an image of himself when he states, 10 men can be eating at a table, dining, and I can come and sit down where they're dining. They're dining, and I've got a plate in front of me, but nothing is on it. This one's a little harder, but out of this logos, ethos, pathos, rhetorical triangle that we've looked at, which appeal is he establishing or utilizing with this image of him at this table, unable to dine while others are dining? Is it logical reasoning with logos? Is he referring to credibility of somebody or the morality of the audience potentially? Or is he referring to emotions or trying to evoke an emotion out of his audience? Take a moment. Alrighty, so for this one, I said Malcolm X is appealing to the sympathetic emotions, emotion, pathos. Sympathetic emotions, though. Notice how I don't just say Malcolm X is appealing to pathos. I'm more specific. What kind of emotions? The sympathetic emotions of the audience. His audience, African Americans, are able to sympathize with Malcolm X and his inability to enjoy the fruits of the country he is living in because they too are living in a world where they can't be diners and be treated equal as everyone else. So, an African American person during the time when he gave this speech could have sympathized with him because they might think to themselves, hey, he's speaking on something that I can directly relate to. I feel this same way. Therefore, I am sympathizing with what he's saying. And that is kind of provoking this emotion out of me. Alrighty. If you guys have any questions on any of those self assessment questions, please let me know. Like I said, you don't have to turn anything in with that, but don't cheat yourself. Do go through it. And you can rewatch this video with some explanations if you want to. I'm going to take a momentary pause and then we will move on to the next segment of the week. Alrighty, so we're going to move forward with rhetorical analysis. We've spent 3 weeks going over rhetorical analysis. So far, we have been able to define various rhetorical terms or choices like logos, ethos, pathos, elements of a soapstone, diction, syntax, simile, metaphor, allusion, imagery, apostrophe, anaphora, etc. By the way, I just want to note that these are not the only rhetorical choices or terms that are out there in the world. There are literally hundreds of them, but I'm focusing for our viewing preference and our understanding. I'm focusing on the ones that I think are most common or most applicable in all texts. Um, so those are the ones we've looked at. I'll have a link on the slides with more rhetorical choices if you so desire to look at those. So since we've been able to define these terms, we've then been able to complete a soapstone analysis of a text. We've done that with 2 texts at this point, the Farewell to Baseball Address and the Roots of a Tree speech. You guys have also seen my example with the McConaughey piece. And then we have been able to identify rhetorical choices in a text. This is things specifically like diction, imagery, and anaphora. Those are the 3 that we've looked at more specifically at this point. And ultimately, this is what we want to get to with any rhetorical analysis, is to explain how rhetorical choices impact author's purpose. That is truly the heart of what a rhetorical analysis is. So just to kind of piggyback on that, whenever you think of rhetorical analysis, think of this motto right here. The motto is, what is the author's purpose and how does he or she achieve that purpose? Answering the how does he or she achieve his or her purpose? The how is looking into the rhetorical devices. Well, he uses strategic repetition throughout his speech to deliver an impactful message that the world needs to hear, something like that. So, like I said, we've done soapstone, we've answered some questions about rhetorical analysis. However, a rhetorical analysis is more than just filling out a soapstone chart and being done. Ultimately, the goal of a rhetorical analysis, like I just mentioned, is to explain what rhetorical choices an author uses and how it impacts his or her purpose for the text. And so, how do we demonstrate understanding of that? Well, we complete a soapstone. That's like a planning step. And then we go into a condensed essay with 2 paragraphs, maybe 3. It would be a little bit more extensive if we were in class together, but I think we'll be able to still get our points across with 2 to 3 2 to 3 paragraphs total. So for this week, we're going to focus on creating that first paragraph of a rhetorical analysis. This is known as the rhetorical summary introduction. And I know that sounds challenging if I were to ask you to create a rhetorical summary introduction, but it's really quite easy after some practice. Essentially what it is, it's basically just taking your soapstone and putting it into a paragraph format. There's this formula that I'm going to show you where you create a rhetorical summary, basically where you just fill in the blanks. It's 4 sentences long, and I'm going to show you that formula for creating a rhetorical summary introduction with an example of each step for the roots of a tree speech that we looked at last week. So if you are with me, give me a thumbs up. Give me 2 thumbs up. Alrighty, hang in there. This will be pretty simple after we get some practice with it. So, sentence 1 of a rhetorical summary introduction really just addresses the speaker, the occasion of the piece, and the subject. Notice how these are all soapstone elements: speaker, occasion, and subject. So you could start by introducing the writer by stating his or her credentials. This is like what makes them credible. Then you dive into their first and last name, and you say, in his or her type of text, is it a speech? Is it a novel? Is it a play? Is it a song? Whatever it may be. The title of the text. A strong verb then to introduce the subject follows that. So I know that's just basically parentheses. You would fill this in so it might look something like this. Civil rights activist, credentials, Malcolm X, writer's first and last name. In his speech, the type of text, roots of a tree, title of text, illuminates, strong verb, the misrepresentation of African Americans established by the white colonists, the subject. So when you read it all together, it says civil rights activist Malcolm X, in his speech, Roots of a Tree, illuminates the misrepresentation of African Americans established by the white colonists. Okay, so that's the first part. Moving forward then, notice how we're still using terms from a soapstone. This time, sentence 2 addresses the author's purpose. So you just say the writer's last name and what their purpose is. Remember, it comes in that to plus a verb form. So I said, X's purpose is to unite African Americans so that their perception of themselves and African heritage isn't brainwashed. That is ultimately what Malcolm X wanted from his speech. He wanted to unite African Americans to not have this sense of brainwashed perceptions about themselves. And we are halfway there. Sentence 3 then addresses the audience and the tone. Notice how this is another soapstone element. So you would say he or she adopts an blank tone or a blank tone. Remember, we talk about this tone being the author's attitude or the speaker's attitude towards the text. So you want to find a fitting adjective that describes or reflects their tone. You don't want to just say, he adopts a tone. Well, what kind of tone is it? Be specific by providing an adjective that directly describes the attitude or feeling conveyed by the writer. So he adopts a blank tone in order to verb. You use this verb phrase to describe what the writer wants readers to do or think. So it kind of ties back to purpose statement with what the writer wants the audience to do, think, or feel. But we could just say something like, he adopts a serious tone in order to illustrate the severity of self-degradation in his African American audience. So he's basically wanting to talk about how basically viewing yourself as less than somebody, how this has negative implications. Lastly, this sentence 4 addresses how the author achieves his or her purpose. Remember, when we think about this, how they achieve their purpose, we have to look at the rhetorical choices that he or she uses. Could say he or she furthers his or her purpose through the use of, mention a rhetorical device or devices. I have a list right here of the rhetorical choices we have looked at. However, if you click on this link, something will pop up if it will ever load. And you would see then this right here. Logos, ethos, pathos, and then a list of rhetorical devices. Alliteration might be one that you're familiar with. Oh, look, anaphora. There's a ton, and a lot of them are kind of confusing. So I try to specifically focus on ones that are most applicable for us, but obviously you can go through and look at those if you want to. I just didn't want to overwhelm you with a gigantic list of rhetorical choices. Lastly, the example then could say something like, he furthers his purpose through the use of symbolic similes and appealing to the sympathetic emotions of the audience. The rhetorical choices I'm looking at are the symbolic similes, simile, and appealing to the sympathetic emotions of the audience, which we have identified as pathos. So when it's all together, you would see something like this. This is the rhetorical analysis summary that I just gave you sentence by sentence. It says, civil rights activist Malcolm X, in his speech, Roots of a Tree, illuminates the misrepresentation of African Americans established by the white colonists. X's purpose is to unite African Americans so that their perception of themselves and their heritage isn't brainwashed. He adopts a serious tone in order to illustrate the severity of self-degradation in his African American audience. He furthers his purpose through the use of symbolic similes and by appealing to the sympathetic emotions of his audience. Sweet. So notice how I just literally just take a soapstone, the chart of rhetorical analysis, and I put it into a paragraph format with this simple step-by-step formula. So I'm going to take a pause there, and then we will try to take our learning that we just found with this rhetorical summary and apply it to a new text. Alrighty. We're going to do some practice with this soapstone and rhetorical summary introduction stuff. So some of this will be repetitive, some of it will be new. In terms of the summary writing, that will be new. But for this week, we are going to use Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. The assignment is labeled Gettysburg Address, Soapstone, and Rhetorical Summary, found on our Google Classroom page. And you should have access to a copy of the document where you can just go in and literally type on it. It will look something like this. Yes. So you have some context for the speech, directions for the speech, the speech itself, it's super short. This is literally it. And I went through and I changed some color. The areas that are color coded are areas that you could look for rhetorical choices specifically. Hint, 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 hint. Moving forward, it is broken up into two parts. Part one is a soapstone for the Gettysburg Address. Who is the speaker? Who are or what are his or her credentials? The occasion, I have a guiding question for that as well. Some of them are a little more self-explanatory. And then I have this formula for diction or for tone, diction, and details. So there's a soapstone that you complete. And then part two says, after completing the soapstone above, complete a 4-sentence rhetorical summary introduction in the space provided. Use the Google Slides and the formula given to you this week to help assist you in creating this summary. And as always, reach out to Mr. Main if you have any questions at all. You would just write it in this space provided. Remember, it's 4 sentences. 4 sentences. Shouldn't be too hard, but remember, just follow this. You might be doing some back and forth in terms of like, okay, going to sentence 1, writing it down, going back, going to sentence 2, writing it down. But I think it will be beneficial for you to do that, and it gives you some good practice. Like I said just now, follow the slides that I just gave you. Before you read the speech, read the text, watch this video linked here. It'll give you some good background on the speech. And this information can actually help you fill out some elements of the soapstone.
The great enemy of writing isn't your own lack of talent, it's being interrupted by other.
Thursday, November 19th, 1863. Before an estimated 15,000 spectators, President Abraham Lincoln dedicates a new soldiers' national cemetery at Gettysburg. In a few moments, he will deliver words that he hopes will guide the Union through the war and start the process of healing.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Lincoln knew he had to raise the stakes of this thing, or else they'd stop. He knew he had to raise the stakes morally, and that's what the Gettysburg Address is about.
That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause, for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.
That short speech of 273 words became one of the most famous speeches in all of American history. Lincoln knew that we must prevail in this war if we are going to remain America.
That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Alrighty. So there are 2 reasons I chose this text. One, because it's shorter, and I think we can be successful with it. And 2, I think it's one that we have all seen or heard about or been exposed to maybe once. But if not, I still think it's applicable, and we can find a way to analyze this rhetorically. So the context for the speech is right here. You could potentially use some of this information as well. There might be some overlap from this text to the video we just watched. But it says, in November 1863, President Abraham Lincoln was invited to deliver marks at the dedication of a cemetery on the site of the Battle of Gettysburg, which had raged in the Pennsylvania countryside for 3 days during the previous July. Lincoln used the opportunity to write a brief yet thoughtful speech. With the Civil War in its third year, the nation was enduring a staggering cost in human life, and Lincoln felt compelled to offer a moral justification for the war. He deftly connected the founding of the nation with the war to keep it united, called for a new birth of freedom, and ended by expressing his ideal vision for the American government. The Gettysburg Address was delivered by Lincoln on November 19th, 1863. Okay, so we know it's in the time of the Civil War, North versus South, and it was at this cemetery dedicated at the Battle of Gettysburg, and he talks about the war and offers a moral justification for it. That's a lot of information that we gathered just from this short little context, but it helps us think about why he wrote this, who he's writing it to, and what he ultimately wants to have his audience think, do, believe, or act upon. So it says, after you watch the directions, after you watch the video linked here and have read the context for the speech, read the actual speech below with a close eye on the author's purpose and rhetorical choices Lincoln uses to convey his purpose. Complete the soapstone analysis and rhetorical summary introduction after reading to demonstrate understanding of the rhetoric employed. As always, email Mr. Main if you have any questions. I'll read this through once, but then I'll let you boogie on. Like I said earlier, those areas that are in blue, these are areas that I just initially find as being strong in terms of rhetorical usage. So you don't have to use these areas in blue, but it could be a good starting point for you. This is the Gettysburg Address. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. It's ironic, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. I love this speech. I'm going to highlight this in blue right here. I'm not going to explain why. You guys know you can reach out to me. But as I was reading, I found this to be rather impactful as well. What is he trying to say in this speech, in this little line here? Don't have to use it, but it is there for you. There's a lot. I almost have like half of this in blue. So pick and choose which areas you want to work with. There is a soapstone to complete, and then your rhetorical summary, basically putting your soapstone in paragraph format. So if you guys have any questions on this, please, you know to reach out. Let me know if I can help you in any way at all. I'm going to take a momentary pause, and then we will get into our last thing for the week. Alrighty. Very last thing for the week, you guys. We have some feel-good news this week. I have a brief video linked. It's short. It's like just a little over a minute, I believe. And then as well as the remote learning week 4 video response. It is right here. So the video is linked here again. And then I have 2 questions that you can answer one of the questions for in just a brief 5 to 7 sentence paragraph. And that is it for me for this week, you guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you tuned in. I hope life is treating you guys well during this time. I miss you guys so much. I love hearing from you. I love when you guys email me just asking how things are going. Things are going well for me, and I hope they are for you. Hope you guys are staying safe. I hope you're taking care of loved ones, and I hope you're remaining positive during this time. Focus on the things you can control, and don't dwell on things that are out of your control, because it will just add more stress to the situation where it is not needed. If you need anything, you know to reach out. You know I'm here for you. I love hearing from you guys, so please reach out for whatever reason. That is it for me. Have a great week, you guys. Be safe. Be smart. Make your parental guardians proud. And as always, go forth and conquer.